Hello everybody, TechnoJock here with the first video, or probably many, of my Harridan build series. In this series I will be building and painting a Tyranid Harridan from Warhammer 40,000. If you're not familiar with the Tyranid forces, the Harridan is a big model. Very big. To give you an idea of scale, this is a Space Marine from the Imperium of Man. He's 7 foot tall, or in excess of 2 meters of genetically modified warrior. And here is one of the very basic foot soldiers of the Tyranid forces. This is the Termagant. So 7 foot tall Marine, or over 2 meters, and this guy, so probably about the size of a big bear or something in real life. This one is just base coated, not an accurate representation of my painting ability. This one is a little bit more of a representation, but bear in mind that this is just a basic foot soldier, so I haven't really lorded much time over it. So how big is the Harridan? Well, this is one of its wings. Let's put the... It's very big. Very big indeed. So that's its wing, and this is its main bit of its body. Here's its tail, which goes on there, like that. So I can't even fit all of it into frame at the moment. And here is its head, which would go on like so. If I can just get it into frame a little bit better. Obviously, these are just out of the box, and there is a fair bit of work to be done to these before we can even start sticking paint onto it. A, it's in bits, although I will be keeping some of it in bits anyway, and B, it's got this stuff on it. It's got flash and sprue bits here. You can see these bits here that are... That's better. There we go. These bits here need trimmed off. There's little extra bits here. And general tidying up. Let's see. Yeah, it's not too bad, but you can see these bits here need taken out. And on the wings as well. And on the head, you can see little bits like this. Just where the resin has been injected in. You can see some of the detail there. That's really quite nice. So this is going to be a lot of fun to stick together. It's going to be fiddly, it's going to take a long time, and then the painting, well, that's going to be a different story entirely, because I'm going to be trying some stuff that I've not done before. I'm going to be doing some airbrushing. But first things first with this model, we need to clean it up, and there's two things really that we need to do. We need to trim off all these flash bits here and just trim things up and make it nice and tidy. There's a few mold lines as well that need tidied up and things like that, just to get everything looking nice, so when we paint it there's no obvious bits where it's been molded. And also this is just straight out of the mold, and what you'll find with resin casts like this is they've got a kind of an oily texture to them. You maybe not see it on camera, but it's the mold release to be able to get this out of the mold that it's made in, and paint doesn't stick to that very well. You know, it's mold release, it's made to be not sticky. So yeah, we need to wash that off. But what I'm going to do is I am going to use a multi-tool to trim all these bits off and smooth out little bits like that. And that's going to produce a lot of dust and stuff. So I would need to wash this afterwards anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim these bits off with a multi-tool, and then I'm going to wash this with warm soapy water, just hand warm soapy water, and I'm going to use a toothbrush to get really into all these nooks and crannies there and make sure that all that mold release agent is scrubbed out of there and our paint gets a good hold on it. You can see there's lots of little bits in there that are going to be tricky to get into, and we need to make sure that that mold release stuff is out of there. So the best way to do that, obviously, need to make sure that we've got all these bits off, and all the sawdust stuffy that's going to come out, all the filings that are going to come out, are going to get stuck onto this. So there's no point in washing it twice. I'm going to do that first, and then I'm going to wash it to get the mold release agent off just now. And I am using a multi-tool like a Dremel thing. I would strongly suggest using that. You could use a craft knife and like a hand saw, like a razor saw or something, but in all honesty, some of these bits are really quite large, and they're going to be difficult to get at with even a razor saw. So a multi-tool is definitely the way forward for this. Look at the detail in that. That's lovely. It's going to be fiddly. Once we've got that done, then it's going to be on to pinning the model together, because these wings are they're big and heavy, and it's got to attach into here. Other way around. That one would go into that socket there, like that. That's not an awful lot of area for that to hold on, and I don't want these things snapping off when I'm in the middle of a game or transporting it or something like that. So I have a plan for pinning this together, and this is not just the simple pinning of when you're doing smaller models of being able to use a paperclip. Paperclip is not going to cut it. I am going to be using a big stick of steel. This is actually off an old grill tray from an oven that I have got my hands on. So that is 5mm thick steel. That's that's not going to shift. So if I drill into this arm like so, go along here, I will be able to put a good length of this rod in there, and then I'll have a corresponding hole into this bit here, like that. And I'm even going to have magnets embedded, because I'm not wanting to glue these wings on, because you can imagine this is going to be quite a big model. I'm not going to be able to carry something that's got its wings sticking out like that around very easily. So I would like to be able to take the wings off, at the very least the wings off, and possibly the tail as well, because it's going to be quite fragile. That sticking out from the end is probably going to break off quite easily if I'm not very careful, so it would be a good idea to drill that out as well, just down there, and then we can attach that on. And that would probably mean that it's going to be pretty secure, but very flexible in terms of being able to stick everything together. Just going to speed up the footage a little bit here, but this is me starting off with a multi-tool with a circular saw attachment. Now do make sure you are wearing personal protective equipment. Goggles are a must, and as you can see by the amount of dust coming off of this, I would strongly suggest some sort of dust mask as well. And if you've got something that can grip hold of these things, it would be a good idea. I don't, but I am being very careful to keep my fingers and everything out of the way, and to angle the saw in such a way that if it does slip, then it's not going to hit me and end up hurting me. Some of the angles make it look like I'm about to slice off my own hand, but believe me, I was actually being very careful at this point. Over to the sanding attachment now, and I'm just taking this down level with what I thought was the plug bit that needs to be fitted into the socket, but actually it needs to come down a fair bit more. But far better to just take off a little bit and then try, and then take off another little bit and then try it again until you get it right. There's nothing worse than taking off too much and then having to fill it in and do some more modelling work. So keep trying and taking off a little bit at a time rather than taking off a chunk at once. And now swapping over onto a scalpel or craft knife. This is a retractable scalpel. It takes proper scalpel blades, and I would recommend something like that, because having the retractable blade makes it a lot safer and a lot easier to control as well. It's a particularly good one, this. So just taking this little nubbin off the end of the tail here, and then being careful just to pare it down and then kind of sculpt in the end of the tail. Over then onto the main body and back to the circular saw, just taking this huge big chunk of flash off what will be the neck of the creature, and being careful not to let it skip, and there's actually a fair bit of modelling work to go on to this. I end up taking this down a little bit more to make it fit better with the head, and there will be a lot more modelling work to go on in between the head and the neck here. In particular, underneath the bony plates where they sort of overlap, there's sort of tendony, sinewy bits that will be put in. You can see that on the other pre-model, the bits where there's not a join, you can see those in places, and that will be need to be modelled in. And then the join underneath the neck where the throat is, there'll need to be some modelling work there as well, the back of the jaw and into the neck, to make that look a bit more natural, you'll see later on. So back in again with the craft knife, and being particularly careful in this spot here, because it's going to be very obvious here, unlike some of the other bits that I was just doing, which are hidden away, and I can get away with quite a bit there. These are going to be, fairly obvious. They're right on top of the creature. So I need to be careful, just trimming away excess with snips where necessary, and then crafting in and sculpting in the last little bit to keep it in keeping with the rest of the model. Onto one of the wings then, and starting off again with a circular saw to take off that huge big injection moulding flash bit. And again, starting off well away, or about a couple of millimeters away from where the model itself starts, and then we'll sand off the excess from there. It's relatively easy to sand this material, so just leave yourself a little bit of excess, so if you slip, then it's not the end of the world and you've not ruined your model. Let's face it, we've spent enough money on this thing. So yeah, just cutting down into the chunk there, and then we'll shift round and get it from another angle, and then we can sand it off in just a second. Coming in then with the sanding tool, you can see how easily this material sands off, so it's very easy just to come in and tidy up that last little bit that you left on there. It doesn't need to be perfect, it's about to go into that socket that we've got and be hidden away, but it's nice just to keep it fairly smooth so it's a nice fit in there. And we can try test fitting it into that socket. As you can see, it's a little bit snug, so I'm going to take off a little bit there. I'm going to model in a little bit later on that. We'll just smooth this bit down just to make sure that's an easier fit so it can go in and out. I can model something around that later on. That's nice. Still with the sanding tool, coming in on one of the mold lines along the front of this cannon. It was a little bit too deep to handle with just the craft knife. And then there's another little bit of flash on the tip of the gun as well that just needed trimmed off with snips and then sculpted a little bit more with the craft knife there. But all in all, actually, the wings were pretty good. In fact, the whole model itself's not too bad in terms of mold lines and things like that. It's just the flash itself, or the big injection molded lumps that were really the big problem there. So the last big chunk to come off is from the bottom of the base. Just going to cut this chunk off and then sand everything up nice and flat on this. I will most likely have to extend this base out though, because it's quite a small surface area. I mean, it's a big base, but it's an even bigger model. And I have a suspicion that it's just not going to be a wide enough base to make this secure, really. Maybe it'd be okay for sitting in a cabinet, but not for moving around on a tabletop when people are reaching over and playing games with it as well. So I'll just make this nice and smooth, and then we'll probably epoxy on some sort of other big base on here, and that'll be fine. And the other thing as well is with this base, or the stand, is you can see the tab there that slots into the base, and that's not a very large surface area, so I'm going to end up probably pinning this as well. So that holds on a lot better. And then on with the rear claws that I didn't show you earlier on, but just snipping off the little excess bits here, and then again we'll use the craft knife just to sculpt the ends of the claws where that extra was on there, just to make sure that everything is looking nice and sharp and suitably deadly for the Harridan. Just coming in there and scraping away little bits of excess. Again, there's nothing really much with these moulds that's wrong. It's pretty good. I can't complain at all at the quality of this. Just coming in and making sure all the little mould lines there are nicely cleaned up, because I want this model to be as close to perfect as I can. Comes up nice, that does. Right, after a fair bit of sanding and cutting and stuff, I think we're pretty much there. I'm quite pleased with how these have come out. It's not quite flat there, but that's going to be hidden in the sockets, so that's not too bad. But it's a pretty good fit. I may need to trim it a little bit more. It's still a little bit snug, and I want it to just slot into that when we've got the pins in place. I think this side is a little bit freer. So that should be good, but I'll need to do some fine tuning of that once I've got the pins in place. The trimming itself has gone quite well. You can see there where it's a little bit lighter where I've sanded things down to get rid of mould lines, but that'll obviously be fine once it's got some undercoat on it. Everything else is pretty much okay. I've taken little bits of flash off from between bits where there was just a little bit of resin left. I don't think I showed you these bits. These were for, these are the big claws that were in a bag. We've got a bag of a few bits and bobs of the smaller things. And these fit on here like this. But I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that, because if I show you with the tail on, the tail I have trimmed down a fair bit more here. And it fits in really nicely. Now it actually kind of slots in and is pretty snug. It was actually holding itself in earlier on. Yeah, there we go. That's actually holding itself in there, so that's not going to take much in the way of modelling around. You can just see there. So that's nice. That's fitted in really, really nicely. So that's not going to take too much work to make that fit in. But if I put on that claw now on this side, you'll see what I mean. So that overlaps a fair bit. So I'm going to need to do some modelling to make sure that stays on nicely and doesn't look weird. But yeah, I think something like that. But if I do it like that, then you'll see there's a little bit of a gap there. So I'm going to need to do a little bit of modelling there with some green stuff or some epoxy gel stuff. And same here, so I might need to sort of round this bit off a little bit more, so it comes round and out a little bit. I think that would be better if it was kind of out like that, away from the tail slightly. But that's good. Take that off. The thing that's going to take a bit of work, I think, is the base. As I showed earlier on, this base slots in like that. And I'm sure I could epoxy it in fairly securely, but there's not an awful lot holding those two together. So what I think I might want to do is drill in, so we're kind of going up and in at that kind of an angle, and have a bit of this metal, let's just get it, going in like that. Probably want to go up a good sort of 3 centimeters to an inch, something like that, and then what I'll do is I'll take this back out and I'll heat it up and bend it so we've got a, not quite an L shape, but coming out so it goes straight down, out like that, and we can model round that a bit, and then the rest of it will go into this, and that'll accept it relatively well, especially if I use it all the way down to the bottom. If I drill all the way down to the bottom there, it should be okay. We're going to be really quite tight on the width of that, but it should still be okay if I'm careful doing it, and then that will be nice and secure. This is okay base, but I think I want some more, something else on the flat of that as well, because it's, there's a lot of model overhanging on the sides and the back and everything, and yeah, it's going to rock about, and I think we need a bit of a bigger base. If we come out about that sort of size, I think that would probably be sufficient. We'll see how we get on with it. The base itself obviously can be one of the last things that needs to be done. But all in all, I am quite pleased with how that has gone on. Yeah. So I just need to go wash that, get all the dust off of it and stuff, and then I'll be ready for next episode where we can pin this, and then I think we can maybe even think about priming it. So until the next time, everybody, enjoy yourselves, have a funs, and we'll see you then. Bye bye.